In my last chapter I have shown you the opposing theories of the various schools which have investigated and experimented along the lines of mental fascination under some of its many names. All of these schools obtained results, notwithstanding their varying and diametrically opposite theories. The same kinds of results, remember. And more than this, they all obtained these results in very much the same way, when we come to examine the essence of the procedure, after discarding the forms added to fit in with the particular theories of the practitioner. A new synthesis. I believe that all the opposing theories of the schools may be reconciled by a new synthesis, that of mentative energy with its incidental phenomenon of mentative induction, as set forth in my Mental Magic, and further expounded in this little manual of which this chapter is a part. I believe that theories so far divergent as Mesmer's universal magnetic fluid, Abi Faria's sleep, Braid's hypnotism, Bovie Dodd's electrobiology, Leiboldt's suggestion, Bernheim's suggestion, the later suggestion without sleep, Brehmen's fascination, and the various other theories advanced since the time of Mesmer, can be reconciled and harmonized by a careful application of the theory of mentative induction as advanced in my work on Mental Magic. And I believe that all the phenomena obtained by any and all of the above schools, as well as the phenomena of the ancient fascinators, and the phenomena known as personal magnetism, charming, personal influence, magnetic personality, etc., etc., of ancient and modern times, may be accounted for by the same theory. And so this chapter shall be devoted to the reconciliation of the various old theories with this basic principle of mentative induction. Mesmer explained. Let us first examine the real facts underlying Mesmer's theory of the universal magnetic fluid. Mesmer taught that there existed a peculiar subtle fluid, magnetic in its nature, which was diffused throughout all space, which permeated everything, and which was capable of receiving and communicating all sorts of motions and impressions. He taught that this fluid flowed freely from one body to another, acted at a distance, and could be reflected by a mirror, etc. He did not explain what this fluid was, except that it produced magnetic effects, and must therefore be magnetic in its nature. He proved that he could produce effects, and he gave out a theory to fit in with the facts, and that was within the comprehension of the people of his time. Now let us apply the idea of universal mentative energy, with its incidental phenomenon of mentative induction, to Mesmer's theory, and see how easily the reconciliation is effected. The mentative energy, like Mesmer's fluid, is universal, is diffused through all space, permeates everything. Like the fluid, it apparently passes from body to body and communicates impressions, etc. But now we know that the energy is transmitted in waves or vibrations which reproduce the original feeling by mentative induction in the second person. There is no necessity for the flowing fluid any more than there is for an electric fluid flowing over wires or through the air. The fluid idea has been superseded by the wave idea in both physics and metaphysics. The nature of the magnetic fluid. We may readily see that this magnetic fluid theory of Mesmer may be explained by the theory of mentative energy and mentative induction. There is no magnetic fluid. The energy is mental in nature and operation, and the phenomena arising therefrom is mentative also. Mesmer sought for his answer in physics, but we find it in metaphysics. The force is not physical, it is mental. All the phenomena obtained by Mesmer and his followers may be accounted for by the theory of mentative energy and mentative induction. The mental states of the mesmerist may be communicated to his subject by waves of mentative energy, and a corresponding feeling or mental state is induced by mentative induction. As we shall see as we proceed, the sleep of the mesmerist and hypnotist is merely an induction condition arising from the desire in the mind of the operator, accompanied by the suggestion on his part. Fabrea explained. The theory of Abbe Faria, that the sleep condition was not the result of any outside force, but arose from within the patient himself, is also reconciled by the theory of mentative energy and induction. Of course the sleep arises from within the patient himself, but it is induced by the waves of mentative energy of the operator, accompanied by his active suggestions. Braid reconciled. Braid's theory is also reconciled. He held that the phenomenon was of a physical nature rather than a mental, and that it was a reflex physical action arising from fixing the eyes, rigidity of the muscles, etc. His hypnotic sleep was undoubtedly heightened by his practice of tiring the eyes and muscles, on the same principle that one is tired mentally by unusual exertion of the eyes, as in the case of visiting an art gallery, museum, strange city, etc. and that the power of resistance is thereby weakened, and one is far more likely to then accept suggestions of mentative waves. How many of us have felt mentally done out after visiting a museum, or after witnessing a long parade, or after sitting through a modern circus performance, with its 3 rings going at one time? And who does not remember how many foolish things he had done at times when he was too tuckered out to object to the suggestions and influences of those around him? A danger signal. Many a girl has gone to her ruin by the subtle suggestions and influence of some male scoundrel, directed toward her after an evening of the show or circus, or after a day of sightseeing in a strange city. I tell you, friends, that in such cases the will becomes tired by overuse arising from unaccustomed tasks, and it becomes woozy and incapable of resisting the attacks upon it. As I have told you in my larger work, beware of all suggestions, etc., when in a tired state. Make a habit of saying no to attempts to make you commit yourself at such times. Wait until you feel fresh and strong, and the will is able to attend its business for you. Many a man has said yes to his sorrow, to propositions advanced to him when he was tired by the day's work, and his will was weak and unable to resist. I cannot say this to you too often, and have therefore dragged it in again at this place. There is a great psychological principle involved in this point, and you will do well to fasten it in your memory. Braid's theory may be reconciled to the idea of mentative energy and induction when we see that his eye fixation and muscular rigidity is merely the means of producing a suggestible condition, that is to say, a condition in which suggestions are more readily accepted and mentative currents are more readily received, in both cases the tired will allowing the outside influence to enter. Suggestion explained. The theories of suggestion are not contrary to those of mentative energy and induction when properly understood. The facts of the suggestionists are undoubted, but they make the mistake of ignoring the mental states of the suggestionist. They think that their effects are produced by suggestion alone, and forget the mental state behind the suggestion, which is the real motive force. If their theories be true, why is it that 2 men using the same words of suggestion upon the same subject produce varying degrees of effect? It is because the mental states or dynamic mentation of the 2 men vary in quality and degree. The suggestionist thinks that he is merely directing his suggestion by words, etc., toward the subject, but all the time he is pouring out a current of mentative energy which rapidly induces the desired mental state in the subject. The best suggestionists are those who have acquired the suggestive manner, which is developed by the exercise of authoritative utterances and commands, the physical appearance, manner, and tones arising from a reflection of the mental state within. I have seen this in the case of one of America's most celebrated suggestionists, a prominent physician and scientist with whom I was associated in magazine and other work in the years 1900 and 01. I have seen the doctor giving the most powerful suggestions at one of his classes or clinics. So powerful were the emanations of mentative energy, or currents of the same, that the members of the class could distinctly feel the same, and at times could almost see them. And yet the doctor, who was wedded to his particular theories of suggestion, pure and simple, after such a wonderful manifestation, would calmly inform his class that it was nothing but suggestion, nothing more to it. And he believed it, but hundreds who attended his classes went away more firmly convinced than ever that there was something more to it, and that there was a cause behind his suggestions. The theory of suggestion is all right, but what lies back of suggestion? What gives the suggestion its force? Of what inner and invisible thing is the suggestion the visible and outward sign? Mentative energy. In harmony, harmonized. And my theory of mentative energy and induction may be reconciled with the theories of the later suggestionists, including those who still adhere to the sleep delusion, as well as those who have advanced beyond it. And it explains all the phenomena of the ancients with the religious and mystic rites. The phenomena of charming, fascination, personal magnetism, personal influence, etc., is all embraced under the theory advanced in this work and my larger work which preceded it. As we proceed with this work, we shall see the mentative energy and mentative induction in actual active operation in these various phases of phenomena, but I trust that this chapter will have shown you that there is one principle underlying all of the various theories and phenomena, and that the facts of mentative energy and the operation of the same in its phenomenal incident of mentative induction are sufficient to include and cover all of the varying manifestations of the force observable under the disguises of the conflicting theories of the various schools and cults. There is but one underlying cause, and that is mentative energy. There is but one underlying law of the operation of this force in the direction of affecting other minds, and that law is mentative induction, either direct, i.e. by mentative currents, or indirect, i.e. by suggestion, or, as is generally the case, by both combined. End of Chapter 4. The rationale of fascination. In this chapter, I shall proceed to lay before you the rationale of fascination, that is, an exposition of the principles of its operation. While the phenomena of fascination extends over a very wide area or field, there is still to be found a certain unity of principle of operation underlying all of the forms and phases. From this point of view, we may speak of the science of fascination as well as of the philosophy of fascination. The fundamental principle. The fundamental principle of the operation of the mental phenomena known as fascination is found in the theory of mentative induction, as stated in my work on Mental Magic, and which is briefly stated in the first chapter of the present book. This theory, you will remember, holds that each individual mind is a center of mentative energy, and that the mentative energy of an individual mind may be, and is, transmitted from one person to another by means of mentative waves or currents. That these mentative waves or currents tend to induce in the minds of other persons the emotions or feelings existing in the mental states of the person sending out the waves or currents. In this connection, we must also remember that there are two mental poles, known as the motive and emotive poles respectively. The motive pole manifesting as willpower, and the emotive pole manifesting as desire force. Desire force acts in the direction of drawing, pulling, attracting, luring, coaxing, charming, etc., while willpower acts in the direction of compelling, forcing, driving, impelling, commanding, demanding, etc. Desire force always draws its object towards itself, while willpower always overpowers and compels its object, generally in the sense of driving it into action. Mentative induction. This mentative induction acts along similar lines to the induction of electricity and magnetism, that is, it sets up similar states in the object affected. And the resemblance is even still further marked when we consider that the phenomena of electricity closely resemble the action of the will, inasmuch as both tend to drive outward in the form of an impelling force, and that the phenomena of magnetism resemble the action of desire, inasmuch as both tend to draw inward in the form of an attracting energy. An interesting question. In this connection, however, I would direct the attention of the student to one fact concerning the effect of induced states, which some have failed to grasp in my teachings in my work on Mental Magic. The matter may be stated by the inquiry of a student of the last mentioned work, who inquires as follows: "Please inform me how it is that an induced mental state reproduces the original mental state of the mentator in the following case. A man desires to have another perform a certain act, and sends a mentative current which acts by induction on the mind of the second person, setting up an induced mental state therein. The second person then performs the act desired by the first person. Now, if the induced mental state was the same as the original one, would not the second party simply also desire that the first party should do the act, just as the first party desired that the second should do it? But it does not work so, for the second party does not so desire, but instead merely desires to do just what the first party desired him to do. That is, he feels within himself a desire to do that which the first party desires shall be done. It seems to me that the induced state is really the opposite of the original state. Please set me straight on this." The answer. I am very glad to have the opportunity to set straight my students on this point. A careful examination will show that both states are similar. For instance, A desires that B shall do a certain thing, and induces a similar state in B. The induced state produces in B a like desire that the things shall be done as he proceeds to do it. No opposite action here, is there? The essence of the desire in both cases is the same, namely, that the thing shall be done. The expression of the feeling of the two persons in the case as 1. I desire that you shall do, and 2. I desire to do, respectively, are merely the personal forms of expression and not the essence of the desire or feeling. The desire or feeling in its real essence is, I desire this thing done. And both hold the same desire, A holding the original desire or feeling, and B the induced desire or feeling. Think this over a little until you see the point. Induced will acts in the same way as the above mentioned instance of the action of the induced desire. Of course, in all cases of the action of desire, the will is also called into operation. In the above cited case, it works as follows. A feels the desire to have the thing done, and so his will is called into operation to concentrate the mentative currents, and to project them to a focused point on the mind of B. Then B, feeling the induced desire that the thing shall be done, awakens his will and does the thing. Do you see this also? You had better fix this process firmly in your minds, for it is the key to the operation of the principle of fascination and other mentative phenomenon. Making another feel like doing. Now to get back to the first principle, which is that one person may make a second person feel like doing a thing that the first person wishes to have done. That is the thing in a nutshell. And in the degree that the second person so feels like doing the thing, so will be the degree of desire and will induced in him, and consequently so will be the likelihood of his actually doing it. You see, the matter of feeling like is at the bottom of it all. And this being so, it is readily seen that if one is able to induce a state of feeling like in another, he has the secret of the control of the other person's actions. Now this is the basis of mental fascination. Now let us see how this principle works out in a case of mesmerism or hypnotism, so called, which after all is but a phase of mental fascination governed by the above-mentioned principle. I prefer the term mesmerism for several reasons, among them being the fact that it is a recognition of Mesmer, its discoverer or rediscoverer, and also the fact that hypnotism means sleep, while mesmerism covers the whole phenomena in both its waking or sleep conditions. A case of mesmerism. Well, let us suppose a case of mesmerism. The mesmerist, whom I will call the operator, faces the subject. The operator assumes a positive state of mind, his willpower being active and concentrated, practice having improved him along these lines. The subject naturally assumes a negative mental state, opening his emotive mental pole to the influence of the mind or will of the operator, and allowing his motive mental pole to remain quiescent or relaxed. That is to say, he opens his desire mind to the influence of the operator and lets his will remain inactive and relaxed. The operator desires and wills that the subject be influenced, and the subject agrees, consciously or unconsciously, to be so influenced. One wills, and the other is willing, which latter paradoxical expression means that he is not willing. The operator naturally asserts his positivity, while the subject assumes a decided state of negativity. One asserts a supremacy of will, and the other submits. I would call your attention to the fact that there is no physical compulsion or influence in the matter, it is all a matter of mentation. And both parties fully recognize the reality of the phenomenon. The silent conflict. The above relative mental state of the two persons is apparent in a greater or lesser degree whenever two persons meet. One is always stronger mentatively than the other, and a silent conflict ensues from which one or the other emerges a victor, and the result is recognized and acquiesced in by both victor and vanquished. Ordinarily, however, the distinction is not nearly so marked or great as in the case of a strong mesmerist and his negative subject, the latter having probably been trained in negativity by repeated trials and experiments in private and in public. For know you, that even as positivity may be cultivated, developed, and strengthened by practice and actual performance, so, alas, may negativity be encouraged, developed, and made habitual by a continued practice of giving in to the will of another or others. It is all a matter of habit. Positive and negative. It will be seen at once that given a subject and operator bearing the stated degrees of relative positivity and negativity, the subject will have a tendency to accept and obey the wishes and commands of the operator with a minimum degree of resistance. The operator will strongly wish the subject to feel in a certain way and to act upon the feeling. To accomplish this result, he will concentrate his desire by his will, and then direct a combined and focused attack on the mind of the subject. He is likely to call suggestion to his aid in the attack, for by so doing he is able to obtain an additional advantage, for a suggestion, as I have stated in my work on Mental Magic, is a physical agent inducing mental states, or an outward invisible sign of an inward feeling or mental state, which tends to induce a similar feeling in the mind of accepting the suggestion. The suggestive command. The operator gives the subject in the suggestion by command, and in accordance with the phrase of suggestion known as suggestion through obedience. See my work on Mental Magic. The subject obeys. It must not be forgotten, however, that the suggestion is merely the outward symbol of the inward mental state of the operator, and becomes effective only by reason of this fact. The operator throws his intensified desire force and will power into the suggestion, and receives an effect along the line of the threefold activity. With his will he produces a dual effect, i.e., 1. He captivates the desire of the subject and induces in it the desired feeling-like state. 2. He takes captive the will of the subject and subjugates it to his own. And at the same time, by his desire he also produces a dual effect, i.e., 1. He induces a similar desire in the mind of the subject by mentative waves or currents, and 2. He allures or seduces the will of the subject by the strength of his desire. The result of this combined attack causes the mind of the subject to act as follows, which adds a third dual effect to the operation, i.e., 1. The subject's desire, being induced as stated by the operator, acts to influence his own will, thus making the latter fall in with the induced desire. 2. The subject's will, controlled as stated by the operator, acts upon its own desire, thus making the latter fall in with the seduced will. It must be remembered that the three mental operations above mentioned are concurrent, that is, they act at the same time and exercise joint action and control upon the mind of the subject. And neither the operator nor the subject are necessarily conscious of there being three dual actions underway. The operator simply desires and wills, with or without suggestion, while the subject simply feels like, as before stated, and accepts the suggestion if one is given, without recognizing the various mental operations going on to produce the feeling like. The detailed explanation may make the operation seem complicated, while in reality it appears to both the operator and subject as quite a simple matter indeed. The daydream state. The above process is the same whether the operator merely produces the simplest result upon the subject, or whether he secures the most remarkable and startling exhibitions of the control of one mind by another. The principle of operation is the same in all cases. With sleep or without sleep, it is the same. In fact, as we shall see, the very sleep condition is produced just as are the other effects, and its production merely tends to produce a daydream state in the subject, and thus makes him act in a daydream-like manner, with appropriate illusions. Sleep phenomena are merely one of the side issues of mesmerism when the true principle is understood. Habit and repetition. Habit and repetition. In our consideration of the operation of mesmerism, we must not forget the part that habit and repetition play in the matter. For instance, the operator may be able to produce only the simplest effects at first trial, but at each subsequent trial, in which he gains more and more control over the subject, and a greater acquiescence and degree of obedience, he is able to obtain a still more marked effect. If you will read my remarks on the suggestion by repetition in my work on Mental Magic, page 120, you will realize the awful force of repetition in habit, as well as the power of repeated statement. This psychological fact is like the operation of the wedge. Admit the thin edge, and each additional blow drives it further in. This works along the lines of both good and evil. Remember, the wise use it to their own strengthening, while the foolish allow it to be their undoing. Beware of the thin edge of the wedge of undesirable habits of thought and action. A psychological law. The mesmerist understands well, often too well, the nature and results of the above-mentioned psychological law. He has found out by experience that although it may be difficult to control a subject the first time, it will be easier the next, and so on until perfect control is obtained. And, knowing this, he bends his endeavors to inserting the very thinnest edge of the wedge, understanding that in this he has his hardest task before him. And alas, how many of us know that this same principle is in operation in everyday life, although seemingly having nothing to do with mesmerism? How many of us are able to regret the day of the entry of the thin edge of the wedge? Another point to be remembered is that the subject who is under a fair degree of control does not feel as if he were obeying the commands or wishes of the operator alone. That is, not in the main. It is true that he instinctively obeys the command of the suggestion, just as a horse quickens his gait when spoken to, or a soldier acts quickly in obedience to orders, etc., etc. But the motive for the action, or feeling, seems to come from within himself to a great degree. It has the force and effect of an instinctive action proceeding along subconscious lines. He seems to want to do the thing of his own accord. This is the dangerous feature. This, then, in a general way, is the rationale of mental fascination as shown in its phase of mesmerism, and its corresponding exhibitions along less pronounced lines. If you will acquaint yourselves with these principles of operation, you will have a grasp on the whole subject. In our next chapter we shall have a view of the mental states of operator and subject, which will throw additional light upon the subject before us. End of chapter 5.
Thank you guys for choosing to watch this video. I hope you will have a very successful couple of weeks coming your way. Please subscribe to my channel by